Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night, April 3rd in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. We're going to go back and look again, just as we did this morning, at the latest storm reports from the last 3 days. And what we're going back to is Friday here, taking a look at now over 939 reports of severe weather. This is the unfiltered reports. These will continue to change with time, but notice that right now 124 tornadoes were reported with this. Even when filtered down, that number comes down to 109. This is one of the most substantial severe weather outbreaks in the Midwest, kind of in the history of record keeping here. And remember, these storms moved east once we got into the day on Saturday, and you can see all of the wind damage that was reported here and in the mid-Atlantic. Then we get into the day on Sunday, and we notice that the hail that was down here in parts of Texas, the Red River Valley, getting over into the lower Mississippi River Valley. And then today, our storms have been down here in parts of Alabama, southern Georgia, and the panhandle of Florida. And there's actually been 2 more reports of tornadoes today. This has been an extremely active week, and while we are going to see a near-term change in this pattern, I have some concerns, and we're going to address this in a few moments, that the pattern is going to come back to this. So over the last 7 days, systems have just run down the west. They've ejected large dry slot, lot of severe weather everywhere that I'm drawing these arrows. Snow on the northern side, heavy rains on the southern side as well. And that's been the setup. Okay. Now, as I talked about the snow here, I just want to show you of the last 3 days where that snow fell. So we did have places in South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the UP that picked up 6 to 18 inches of snow. This did come through the northern Rockies and also hit parts of the Cascades. In fact, I saw some reports out of Portland, Oregon of some snow falling there. So what are we going to do in today's video? Well, we know that more snow is coming. There's winter storm warnings that are out from parts of Utah all the way to Minnesota. Blizzard warnings cover parts of Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and now Minnesota. So there's a whole lot more snow coming here. We're going to talk about it. We did see with last week's system a major dust storm. We also saw fires in Oklahoma. And here we go again with high wind threat red flag warnings. And the part we're going to talk about this is a multifaceted system. We're going to stress, first of all, where the severe weather threat is going to be tomorrow on Tuesday. It is different from last week in the shape of this system, its trajectory, and where the frontal boundary will be moving through the Mississippi Valley and what time it will. So notice the moderate risk that's been added here by the Storm Prediction Center for tomorrow on Tuesday is a bit farther to the west than it was last Friday. But this moderate risk area in parts of Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri is almost in the exact same location. This system, just like the one last week, will advance east. We do have a large area that on Wednesday we're going to be watching out for the frontal boundary here to swipe through and increase the risk of mostly wind damage, but also there's still a hail and tornado threat of this in the day on Wednesday. That's component number 1 of the storm system. The second component is going to be the snow side of this. So this is a map showing the probability of getting, over the next 3 days, greater than or equal to 12 inches of snow. And what we notice here is there's a better than 80% chance in through this corridor. We're going to talk about what that's going to do in terms of continuing to push things farther and farther away of getting field work done, spring field work done, and planting in this particular part of the country. And then finally, we got to talk about this. The models did trend significantly warmer toward mid-April, but we have bigger questions as to whether or not the sustained warmth is here. Whoops, sorry about that. Or does it press farther to the east? And do we actually find ourselves back in a pattern like we've been seeing? So that's what we're going to do today. All right. So let's go to here first. This is this afternoon. Let's get a new update, 4 o'clock, 4:20 in the afternoon. And what I'm watching right now is that there is a stationary front parked right in through here. Actually, it's a warm front. It's trying to advance north. Clouds are cooling off this area. Very hot in Texas, and just an incredible temperature contrast north to south across the country. So 90s all the way up to some places down here in the low teens. That is the temperature contrast. So what does the atmosphere want to do? Zip right in between it. So we're starting to see that by looking at some of the satellite data. Now, this was this afternoon here on Monday, large complex of storms and rain shower that's out ahead of this very weak little shortwave that's sitting here. But the longer wave that's behind it is the one that's going to eject into the plains tonight and set up this next 2 to 3 days as having an active system that runs quickly over toward Lake Superior and into Ontario and Quebec. We need to talk about what that's going to do to these Canadian provinces as well. But as it stands, along that boundary, right in through here, there are some storms popping up this afternoon right into this area. But it's what's coming behind this I want to have to watch very carefully. All right. Here is what the winds are expected to look like later on this afternoon as I'm recording this. There's that stationary front. The winds continue to kind of pick up momentum coming out of California and Nevada. They're curling at the base of this trough, wrapping themselves up into this low. And this is why we got those high wind warnings out across a large part of the southwest and southern plains. But take a look at how the wind field evolves with this system. What we're going to do here, let's see if we get an update. Okay, good. We got the 12Z run in here. What we're going to do is we're going to play the high-res NAM forecast of accumulated wind gusts as this system evolves on Tuesday. We're going through Tuesday now, and then into Wednesday morning. Now remember, this model can capture thunderstorm wind gusts. It actually has the ability to capture convection. But overall, this is a synoptic scale wind pattern ripping out of the Four Corner states and racing across the Midwest to the Great Lakes. So this whole coloring shade you've seen here is representing winds in the 40 to 50 mile an hour range. So we will likely see the expansion of where we have the high wind advisories and watches and warnings as the system continues to traverse across the country. But what I want to really get into for a moment here, like I told you, 3 big topics, okay? The first of which is going to be the severe weather threat. So I'm going to start off on Tuesday. We're just going to break this down using the SPC convective outlook map for Tuesday. So again, 2 large areas of moderate risk. Here's the tornado probabilities. Now, as we look at some of these numbers, we're up to a 15% hatched, and the hatching basically represents the probability of having an EF2 to EF5 within 25 miles of any given point. So once again, this system has 2 points of concern, the triple point here, and then down here along the main frontal boundary that slices through. Just as to bring up the difference again, last Friday's system, the second mod risk was much farther over to the east, closer to the Mississippi River. The wind threat, again, this is the wind threat we have on Tuesday. Widespread chances here of having strong winds over 60 miles an hour. And then the hail threat's primarily going to be confined farther to the north, up near the triple point of this system here. I want to show you one other thing, the day 3 outlook. Probability here, we're looking from parts of the eastern half of Illinois through Indiana, Ohio, getting up to Michigan. This area, we're going to watch this storm system kind of rip through and possibly produce. There could be some rotation in these storms. There's still a good synoptic environment to get them to rotate, but I think it's going to be more of a wind threat as we press forward. So let's do a little bit of a kind of a multi-model analysis, and I want to start you off with a high-resolution rapid refresh model. We commonly call it the HRR. So on that frontal boundary, right in through here, we see some afternoon scattered showers and storms like we just saw on the satellite data. Of note, the main system is still back here, and these are the scattered storms that are with that wave that moved through parts of Georgia today, still spreading some rain this evening into the Carolinas and parts of Georgia. Now what we're going to watch as we go into the overnight hours and out into Tuesday morning and Tuesday midday, right in through there. What I'm concerned about is with this next system, the models have been putting kind of multiple waves of brief but scattered storms out ahead of this. And then what we're all having a discussion about is actually right here, this system. Now, this is well ahead of the main frontal boundary. And this is possibly being initialized by an upper level shortwave that's sneaking around. There's going to be plenty of instability, plenty of wind shear. But the concern is that when this forms in northeastern Missouri, out ahead of the main front, there could be a complex of storms that blows up and goes right along the Mississippi River into southern Wisconsin. This is going to hit parts of Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois. And this has been a consistent feature in some of the models. We have to watch out for this. All right. Then remember, the HRR only runs out 36 hours. So what we're going to watch is along this path in the overnight hours. This is where we have one of our frontal boundaries. We're going to watch for some storms to kick up. And then later on that evening, on the main front on the back side, for storms to come through. So there are actually multiple chances with this system for storms, given how tightly it's going to wind itself up. And I haven't even talked about the snow side of this yet. So I want to take you to, again, one of my favorite sites, pivotalweather.com. And I'm just going to play out the NAM model. I want you to watch the evolution of this warm front throughout the day on Tuesday. And let's just park it out there, 7 o'clock in the evening. Now, this would be ahead of that first pulse, but I'm just curious what the environment shapes up like after that. So what we're seeing here is a forecast sounding, and a couple of things are a bit troublesome, but I guess not really. First of all, the shear is kind of off the charts. We're looking at shear numbers here that are 50 knots from the surface to 3 kilometers. That's really high. That's going to produce very high storm relative helicity numbers. over 500. And this hodograph is of great shape to produce rotating storms. What I'm concerned about is how the environment may be affected by convection earlier in the day. We need to get the sun out to really heat the surface back up. And this mix layer near the surface could be problematic. And what I'm saying is, if we were looking at a massive outbreak, I would want to see this red line shooting way over here into these warm temperatures. And maybe the environment is a bit, I don't know what the right word is here, kind of polluted by the early day convection and how this mix layer in the lower levels could influencing. So I'm just letting you know that unlike last Thursday and Friday where we had a bit more confidence in how this is going to shake down, I'm seeing some differences here overall. But we can continue this analysis by going to the high-res NAM to kind of see if it's got a different solution here. So as we play this forward through Monday afternoon and evening, this is the time when the HR's blowing up that system here. We can see some scattered convection. Oh, I'm so sorry. This is Monday. I got my times off here. But this is the frontal boundary. We talked about it. There we go. Now this is Tuesday afternoon. This is the time when the HR is blowing up a storm here. The NAM is not. It's got it later and farther back to the west. But it is attempting to produce supercells in eastern Iowa and along the Mississippi River. Just different timing. And then there's the main front coming through later. So that sweeps through in the overnight hours, gets to line up here with Lake Michigan all the way down to Texas by midday on Wednesday and sweeps across. And this is why we have the day 2 risk of the severe storms. Now with this model run, we can also see the kind of a better outlook on what that snow is going to be. So now let's watch here and keep an eye on the ice as well. This heavy snow corridor is going to come out of Wyoming. It's going to clip parts of Colorado, western Nebraska, and then hit very hard parts of South Dakota, North Dakota, the Red River Valley, and northern Minnesota. And there you can see it taking shape. We will have winds that'll be strong enough to reach the blizzard criteria and some overrunning that'll produce freezing rain out ahead of this. And you'll notice in the forecast that spreads into Ontario and Quebec. Pretty far to the north, like down here in this part of Ontario, I think it's going to be all rain and severe storms, but this system has quite a punch to it, and it's going to hit parts of the southern Canadian prairie as well. Now the issue is, with all the snow that's expected to fall in this area, and we'll take a look at those totals in a few moments, we know there's already a lot of snow on the ground. And I was just thinking about this because I got numerous questions today about when will spring finally get to the northern plains where they can make progress. And my concern is, even if the warmth does come in, because you saw the models earlier in this presentation want to bring that warmth in, is it enough to quickly melt this? And what does that spring flood look like? So I'd like to show you some comparison just to wrap our minds around how much snow is here. We've spent a lot of time talking about the West, and I'm going to include that in tomorrow morning's report, more details about the Western Snowpack. I'm going to focus here tonight because what we've got right now compared to a year ago is this. And the year before that, in 2021, it looked like that. So what a difference, 3 years, right? 2023, 2022, and 2021. Now, I wanted to find the most recent year where there was still a lot of snowpack in the upper Midwest and the Northern Plains. And I only had to go back to 2018 to see that. Now look, here's 2023, and there's 2018. Now, we just had a system roll through here. April was brutally cold throughout the country. But you can see the difference. We actually have more snow on the ground and more water in that snow this year even than 2018. And why I'm comparing to 2018 is, remember, 2018 statewide average temperature ranks coldest, one of the coldest Aprils on record for so much of the country. It was drier though, okay, in this part of the country. We then know that what happened after this, I talked about it last week, was that May showed up and it was near record warm. In fact, all of these states had record warm average temperatures in the month of May. So we want to know about the pattern flip. We want to know how quickly things are going to melt. And I want to remind you something about snow melt. So when you're thinking about this, it's not just daytime high temperatures that can melt it. That works great. But if you have overnight lows that stay above freezing, that will eliminate a snowpack quickly. If you don't, what ends up happening here is every night when you get a refreeze, you get a crust that's built on the snow that has to be overcome the next day. And that prolongs the risk of the snow sticking around. Now, I just made a quick kind of back of the envelope calculation about this, including how much water's in it and how much time I think it's going to take to melt this off. Even if we have sustained very warm conditions, we will probably still be looking at a minimum of 30 days of delay here in terms of really making progress on getting a crop established. And that starts to push us into early May, and this does not even account for any additional precipitation. So I'm very worried for the folks that are up here in the northern plains of the United States. Okay, we've covered that. Let's get now here. We know that more snow is coming, and earlier I intended we'd take a look at how much snow is going to be coming through this. So this is this afternoon's high-res European model run. And what you're going to see here, let's just play this out through the end of this week on Friday. This is the main snow corridor. Remember, the pinks on my chart are up here above 15 inches, and I start 4 inches with blue. So what we're looking at here is a swath from parts of Wyoming where we could have up to 20, 25 inches of snow, coming through South Dakota up toward the Red River Valley of the North, extending into parts of southern Manitoba into Ontario, with a swath in through here that could easily grab 15 to 18 inches of snow. So we're going to add that to this. There's also ice with this system. Notice that as the warm front really lifts, we're going to watch for overrunning. That means ice potential for parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, Lake Superior, Ontario, Quebec, and possibly into Maine as well. So to see all of this, let's actually go look at our multi-model analysis. These are the 12Z runs today, and we've already seen the forecast up to about this point. So what you're going to notice is keep an eye on where that ice is. This is Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and evening. So that's as the front clears. The severe weather threat is primarily in this corridor, and that system rolls on up into the Canadian Maritimes and leaves a front right here. Now, two things are going to happen once we get past Wednesday into Thursday of this week. That front is going to serve as a boundary on which more storms are going to form. It's in both models. And there is another coastal low coming into the Pacific Northwest. So if we notice here, we've got a system in the northwest. This is this Friday. The frontal boundary lingers, high pressure built into the Midwest. And we're going to see storms continuing to fire on this throughout the day on Saturday. That's going to keep the southeast up to the Carolinas wet going into this weekend. Now, after that system rolls out, there's a change in the pattern. And there will be another shortwave, it looks like next Sunday, that comes right through this area. It's actually in both models here, that could curl up over the Great Lakes. It's nothing like the ones we've had. The last two we had did this and then did that. This one's coming in a different trajectory. And why it's coming into a different trajectory is because the pattern, once we get out here at this far, is really beginning to shift along the west coast. You notice, though, by next Tuesday, there's still a low hanging off the west coast. But after that, we're going to watch a pattern begin to evolve. That's going to be quite important for us to understand what this mid-April timeframe is going to look like. This is what we're going away from. You see, we did have a big Aleutian Island ridge, and flow would kind of dive in over the west and run up over a southeastern ridge here. What helped these troughs stay in place, I'm talking about right here, was the fact that both upstream and downstream, there was a ridge. There was one here, and there was a big one here. So the pattern had no reason to move, and it was supported by the MJO. There was no high latitude factors that could get in and shove this out. So we spent March looking like this. This is the March pattern. Okay, from here, what I want you to see is, over the next week, there's the deep trough that initiates the severe weather on Tuesday into Wednesday. And following it, by Saturday, while these little systems keep coming into the northwest, and there's a little wave that runs through the Midwest, the big problem is trough here and trough there. Not a problem. That's a solution, honestly. These are the two places I just told you we've had almost semi-permanent ridges. So what does this do? Going to next week, it opens up a ridge across the west and warmth and produces flow that does this. Now, the significance of that flow going into week 2 means there's upper level convergence right in through this area. And upper level convergence is a drier signal. The ridging over the west is a drier signal. You see the flows coming into British Columbia. We could be watching out, though, for deeper troughing over the southeast and therefore storm systems there. But what a look. Now, we want to know how long this lasts. And the longer wave is not retrograding like I had hoped. What I mean by that is, after we get past next week and getting in toward the middle of April, what happened again? There's a ridge that formed here, troughing along the west coast, and now we got a ridge sitting in this area. And I'll just tell you, anytime you see a west coast trough, the flow has to curl around the base of it, and it's going to open up warmth, destabilize the atmosphere, and set us up going past the middle of April back into what we just saw at the end of March. An active pattern for the whole of the United States. So this is a 1-week sliding window of precipitation anomalies. This is where we are right now. Now remember, you see drier in here, but there's going to be storms screaming through here that the model's not picking up on. This is the lingering frontal boundary we talked about in the next couple systems coming into the northwest. All of this, snow. As I slide this forward and that system gets out, the week 2 forecast, let's just pause it right out here, ending on the 17th. So this is the 10th through the 17th. We saw during that whole transition drier weather coming in. And the reason for that was because that's the time period we see flow like this. What I'm concerned about is past mid-month, it goes right back to where it was. So given that, even though the European model is the model I tend to focus on, I want to let you know the GFS sees the same thing. At the end of the week 2 time period, look at the increased moisture coming back into the west, the drier conditions pressing east, and possibly the return of already seeing some moisture coming up through the southern plains. I'd love it if this happened given the drought situation there. The temperatures are showing a similar response. This is what they've got. Next 5 days, we're locked into this, but the pattern begins to moderate. There's the warmth coming in with the ridge. All of this is snow feedback. Okay, that's what that is. Here's the trough that's over the southeast. This is around there between I think the 8th and 13th. And then there's mild conditions. What we're all going to watch for is watch the end of this animation. Do you see the trough redeveloping? There'll be a warm sector out ahead of this, but the pattern could go right back into this configuration, which sets us back up with active severe weather as we finish the second half of the month of April. Now, as I think about this, I'm going to look for support in the forecast. And I think our strongest teleconnection remains the MJO. It has come right back out over into the Western Pacific. And if it kind of sets up camp in this area, phase 7, historically phase 7 supports troughs of low pressure in the northwest with ridging here. And that's almost exactly what you saw in the near-term forecast. So what that means is that as we stretch this out and look longer term, the likelihood of keeping more mild air in the central part of the United States, maybe parts of the Corn Belt, that's there. That's a possibility. And therefore, there's going to be a lot of folks that between April 10th and May 10th are going to look for this and try to find the breaks in the precipitation to go after it. What I do not agree with in this forecast, because I agree with the temperature forecast during this time period, and no, I don't like to see the cooler air returning in the west. But just as a reminder, to be 3 to 5 degrees cooler than normal in the west, this time period, there's going to be mild air that's in place here, okay? What I do not agree with is this forecast. This is the April 10th to May 10th forecast on total precipitation. This will not be as dry as advertised. In fact, I would redraw this to say this whole area is going to continue to be active and wet. Okay, that's just the difference. Does the CFSV2 agree with it? Okay, certainly see the temperature pattern flopping in week 2. There it is. There's the change. The colder air getting off east, the warmer air starting to arrive. And then in week 3, week 4, it still carries a cooler bias north, but it starts to moderate things getting toward the end of April. What I actually agree with more out of the CFSV2 is its precipitation pattern. I think we're going to see more of this going into the end of April and the beginning of May. That's what I think. Just synoptically, that makes more sense to me. I am more than ready to be wrong about it, but I'm just telling you what I think I'm seeing right now. So you distill all that down, and I think it actually lines up pretty well with what the National Weather Service is saying. This is their forecast, and we showed this morning, but this is their monthly temperature outlook for April. And I buy into this. This makes a lot of sense to me given the MJO position, given the tendency for the colder air to be getting a feedback from the snow here, dipping the jet farther to the south, which means where there's mild air, we're fighting tight windows with respect to precipitation. Where there's cold air, it's going to impact the melt of the snowpack. It's also going to impact, the depth of the troughs that are throughout the west. So you ask me, when do I think we're going to make a full breakaway here in the northern plains, upper Midwest, to get rid of the snow and move forward? I unfortunately don't think that that's going to come in the near term. And even with the warmth that's coming, remember, we just looked at this, that is not going to make the situation better. It's going to start the spring melt. And I just don't think this pattern is going to calm down beyond that. All right, I got a last couple things to show you here. I think that this map, again, is going to continue to become more colorful where it is. What I mean by that is where we're drier, I expect it to stay drier. Where we're wetter, I expect it to stay wetter. And this is just your last 30 days of precipitation expresses a percent of normal. What has been critical to see here is that over the last few months, our 0 to 100 centimeter soil moisture percentile maps have begun to change. We've seen remarkable improvements everywhere inside of the area that I'm showing you here. Remember, all of this was deep in drought last fall and winter. What you have up here is all snow sitting on top of this. And this area has got better moisture in the top, 4 to 18 inches, but that's got to get down there deep, down to 100. So we are seeing actually some very positive signals for the upcoming year based upon this. Lastly, I want to give you an update on El Niño's arrival. We continue to see the temperature pattern evolving in a way that we're expecting a lot of warm water to begin to surface here. And the trade winds right now, we've actually got a pretty sizable westerly wind burst going on. And those are all early signals of the arrival of an El Niño. I want to point out that I've shown you so many different models in their forecast of El Niño, the European, the Australians, and so on. But our own CFSV2, for those of you watching in the United States, has also got this projected. Look at their ensemble average. By summer through fall, they're expecting average ocean temperatures to be 2.5 degrees C above average, which means that if this manifests itself and the atmosphere responds, then we are looking at what could be heat west, cooler potential in the central United States, a less active hurricane season. But I want to remind you, those correlations are not set in stone. That's why we watch this stuff constantly. I've only left a moment for South America, but it's going to be a pretty quick narrative. Safrinha crop is going to enjoy this. Near normal to above normal precipitation. No early signs of this monsoon shutting down. We're drier in Rio Grande do Sul and Uruguay and along the Paraná River Basin, but heavy rains coming into northern Argentina and Paraguay. This has been a pretty consistent message in the models for a while. So Safrinha crop will benefit from this. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Appreciate Eric's attention tonight, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.